Hello and welcome to another season of the Empower a Woman show. In the last 3 seasons, we have talked about women in the Bible, who they were, what they did, and what we can learn from their stories. From Genesis all the way to Revelation, we took the time to talk about as many women as we could. We talked about the good, we talked about the bad, and in some cases, we talked about the ugly. It was phenomenal, and we absolutely enjoy talking about those women. But in this season, God has put it on our hearts to start to talk about women that are everyday women that you might have heard of, that you might know, women from as far back as the 16th century to women that are still walking the shores of this earth today, that have done significant things. We want to talk about these women and their stories because we truly believe that each and every one of them have something that they can teach us, have something that we can learn from them, and perhaps we will find ourselves in the middle of their stories. So in this season, our focus is going to be talking about different women, from Mother Teresa to Francine Rivers to Heidi Baker. We will talk about amazing women that are doing great things for God. My name is Amanda, and I have with me on the show today
Erica Idechofu.
In this first episode, we wanted to talk about women that have really impacted us personally. Over the next few weeks, we will have a few guests. Some of them you will know from season 1, 2, and 3, actually. Some you will just be interacting with for the first time. Each of these women are going to bring a new flavor, a different perspective, and they will bless and encourage you. But in this first episode, we wanted to talk about, myself and my sister wanted to talk about women that have impacted us personally, their stories touching our lives and changing us, and in a way, maybe making us the women that we are today. So the first woman that I want to talk about personally is a woman that I had the privilege of knowing, I had the privilege of loving. She's no longer with us, but she's got a phenomenal story, and she challenges me every day to be a better version of myself. I look at her life, I read the story of her life, and I'm just encouraged and I'm just blessed by her. And that phenomenal woman, I love that word very much because I don't know how else to quantify some of these women. Sometimes I feel like amazing is not enough.
So we're going to be hearing that word.
So we're going to be hearing a lot of phenomenal, I think. And the first woman that we want to talk about in this season is Jennifer Rees Larcombe. Some of you might know Jennifer Rees, some of you might know her story. She was born into a Christian family. Her father actually and her parents were the first people to turn Hildeborough Hall in Kent into the first Christian residential center in Britain. She came into a family that had a beautiful, beautiful legacy. They did phenomenal things for God. So that's the kind of family that Jen was born into. She later married and had 6 children, loved the Lord, serving God with her whole heart. But a turning point in her life was when she had a brain virus, which left her disabled for many years. At the time when she was first diagnosed, it was really terrible. It was life-threatening, to the point that they had kind of written her off in terms of her recovery and had put her on permanent disability. Now, at that time, normally the disability award would be reviewed every few years, but in her case, the panel of NHS doctors looked at her situation and thought this was terminal. She was never going to recover from it, and that was just going to be the woman that that was the way she was going to continue to live her life.
I remember you were talking about the doctors and the fact that they thought she was terminal. I think you were showing me some of the research you had done, and something that stuck out to me was the fact that they were giving her a lot of morphine. And she asked the question, will all this morphine, will it make me an addict? And they said something along the lines of,
for people that are terminal,
yeah,
we don't worry about that.
Because
it's
for people that are terminal, which I guess goes to show what they thought the prognosis was going to
look
like. Yeah.
And so for her, for many years, she struggled with that prognosis. She had 6 children. She was married at the time. Life became difficult. She went through periods of being anxious and depressed and just praying to God. She really desperately wanted to be healed. And so every healing evangelist, every book that had been written, as many people as she could access, it was all about God heal me, God heal me. But then she got to, there was a turning point in her life where she remembered that God was the center of it all. Or she had an encounter, actually. She had an encounter with God. Actually, she was dragged in cow dung. Funny fact of the story. But in that process, in the debt, in the being in a situation that was uncomfortable, she had an encounter with God where God, said to her, literally, you've taken me out of the center, put me back in the center. And she got to the place where she was able to come to terms with her disability. And it no longer became the thing that defined her. It no longer became the thing that she was focused on. Actually, God healed her and did a deeper work on the inside of her. And she started to understand the importance of being healed emotionally and how it was so much more important than even physical healing. She came to a place of peace. She came to a place of acceptance. She brought the pastors. She did the whole James 5. The elders came and they prayed. And it was a turning point in her relationship with God because she had finally come to a place where she's like, Jesus, is just me and you, and I'm content.
Yeah. Can we just go back to, you were talking about the fact that she had this experience with God when she was literally sitting in some cow dung. That's just, God meets us at our lowest points. That's what I was thinking. I was just thinking, my brain was just scanning through the Bible, and we see that happen a lot. We see, was it Elijah who ran away because he didn't want to be killed by Jezebel, and he was broken and hungry, and
that's where God met him.
And that's where God met him. Where was Gideon? He was hiding, and God met him there. And I think that that's an encouragement for us. You might feel like you're in the deepest, darkest place of your life and there's no beauty or there's nothing there to be found. But God will find you and he will meet you there because that's the God he is. He loves us and he cares for us.
And I love that one of the things that Jen said was that at that point, that God didn't change her outer circumstance, but he changed her from the inside, and he changed the way she was able to feel about the situation, brought her to that place of acceptance. And in fact, she didn't stop with her own struggle and what she had been going through. It almost was a catalyst for Beauty from Ashes, where she started this amazing organization that brought healing to the lives of other people that were hurting. And that was an organization that I also had the privilege of being a part of and growing up in Beauty from Ashes and going there and getting my own inner healing, because sometimes that's what we need. We think that all the issues are on the outside, but really and truly it's on the inside. It starts from the inside because that's the place where we encounter God and we die to self and live for Christ. We come to a place of love and acceptance. And actually, I remember a few years ago, I was sitting under a teaching of a man who I now have the privilege of calling a friend, and he said to me, inner healing is more powerful than outward success. That sometimes if we don't take the time to sort out the trauma, the pain and the stuff that's going on the inside, no matter how successful you look on the outside, it's going to have a negative impact. So that we need to be focused on, God, what are you doing on the inside? What needs to be healed? What needs to change? What needs to be restored and redeemed? And out of that, God can do something miraculous with our lives.
Yeah, and beyond that inner healing, something that I've always heard is that when you, a lot of times when you're in a situation and you pray about it, say you're in this situation with another person, for example, that what God usually does is, rather than change that person, is he changes you.
Absolutely.
And it might be that he's changing your heart or your outlook, but he does work on you on the inside first before you see the outward manifestation, before maybe he even does something for the other person. And that's really profound because that's where it starts. We're spirits. Everything that we touch and we feel and it started with the breath of God. It starts on the inside. It starts with that thing on the inside that you can't see. And that's where the healing, the real healing and the work that God is doing always starts. So it's quite important, actually.
It's quite important.
Yeah.
But her story doesn't end there. She was in a wheelchair for 8 years, haven't come to the point of, encountering God and accepting where God, had met her, and even in her situation, reaching out a hand through Beauty from Ashes and helping other people come to a place of inner healing. She's at a conference one day and she gets prayed for by a new Christian, and God does the miraculous.
Wow.
He heals her miraculously. And actually...
Physically this time, on the outside.
Physically on the outside. And Jen had prayed. She had prayed a prayer to God. She had said to God, I want to see this happen. This miraculous healing that has happened in the Bible, I want to see it happen in my lifetime. But she wasn't necessarily praying for herself. She was just, you know how it is where you're like, God, I want to see the supernatural move. I want to see you do something significant, something, supernatural.
Yeah.
And she had no idea that, I think it was about a month later, God answered that prayer, but he answered that prayer in her own life.
Amen.
At the time, this is going back to many years ago, it was one of the most significant healings that had happened. The BBC talked about it. It was on the news.
Because she was known.
Because
right?
she was known because of the work that she had done, and and the work that she was doing. She had been writing books at the time. She had come from this well-known family, so she was known. And so this physical healing happens. That completely changed her life in a good way, but it also became the thing that people used to describe her, people used to define her. I remember reading somewhere where she said she had overheard 2 women talking about her in a cubicle. And one was saying, oh, who's Jennifer Rees? And the other one was like, oh, that woman that got healed from a wheelchair. And she had to take a breath and think, is this what people are going to remember me for?
Yeah.
Because in everything that she had come to experience with God, as supernatural as her healing was, that was not the thing that she wanted as her own legacy, because she felt the inner healing that God had done in her and bringing her to that place of bring him back as the center of her life was the more significant healing. But of course, people talked more about the physical healing.
Well, they talked about the physical healing and in different ways.
In different ways. There were critics.
I remember reading that when she got healed and she got home, her kids were older at the time, and one of them that was 22 was like, well, why didn't you get healed when we needed you more? Imagine.
that would have been difficult to hear. And there was even someone who said to her, oh, if you had had a bit more faith earlier. As though it was her own faith that prevented her healing.
And I think sometimes there's a miracle in your life, and it can be the most amazing thing that God has done for you. And the world just doesn't get it. And you're blamed, or you're criticized, or you're made to feel one way or the other about your miracle. Like, I can't imagine how she felt about that, and how did she start to think, God, you should have left me in the wheelchair because now I've let my children down, or what? And then of course there was a lot of noise in the news. People were saying that she had been pretending for so long that it wasn't a real miracle, so all these kind of things. And I was just reading that and I was thinking to myself, when God does something amazing in your life, it's supposed to be celebrated, right? But the way world people are, let me just call them that, they can just try to take that joy away from you. But you know what? The fact that for her, that wasn't the main thing, but it was that inner healing, meant that didn't shake her faith, or that didn't affect her relationship with God, because as far as she was concerned, that was a nice to have. The real thing was that inner healing that she had received.
And that's exactly what she says. She says that she's grateful for her physical healing, because it gave her the opportunity to talk about the more important healing, which was her emotional and internal healing. And what she said, and I like to quote her, she says, I believe God does miracles constantly. I watch him do them most days. The physical definitely attracts more publicity and controversy, but the lasting freedom and transformation of invincible miracles bring far more people to faith in Jesus. And although Jen is no longer with us, I'm grateful that she's left a lasting legacy. Beauty from Ashes continues to be an organization that provides healing and brings, brings the love of Jesus to the hurting and the broken. She was gracious to pass on the mantle to Carol Bostock, who continues to do a great job in carrying on that legacy and, bringing people to that place of inner healing. There have been physical healings that have happened as well, but there is something about knowing that there is a legacy in place that brings people back to the center, that brings God back to the center of the hearts of people, because they start to see him as more important going on that healing journey than what happens on the outside. It's what happens on the inside. So I do encourage you to have a look at Beauty from Ashes. Maybe take a read of Jennifer's biography. And if you're in that place where you need inner healing, then it's an awesome ministry to get in contact with. In these days, they are doing a lot of work remotely. There's a lot of stuff that's happening on Zoom. So wherever you are in the world, you can always connect with what Beauty from Ashes is doing. Let's hear a word from our sponsors.
This is an appeal on behalf of Bible Society. Pastor Bao is a former drug addict. When he read the Bible for the first time, he said, "My eyes were opened, I understood God's love, and I gave my life to Christ." Today, Pastor Bao leads a church of 100 believers. Many rural church members in China have never owned a Bible. Please call 01793 418 222 so you can provide the Bible to people all around the world every month. Your gift will help more people like Pastor Bao discover God's Word. Please call 01793 418 222. Thank you.
A huge thank you to the Bible Society for sponsoring this season. Because of the work that you do, there are so many lives that continue to be changed, and people have the opportunity to read the Bible in their heart language, in their own language. And, it's just phenomenal. And we're really, really grateful that we can partner with you to bring the show to life. In this part of the show, I'm going to invite my sister to talk about a woman that has inspired you, that has encouraged you. Who is that woman for you?
So I hummed and hawed about this a bit, but the reason I've decided to talk about Ruth Graham, the wife of evangelist Billy Graham, is because, well, one, people would have known her. She went to be with the Lord not too long ago, about 17 years ago, but also because her life has some very practical lessons. So let's get into it. There's quite a bit in there. So I've also already said that she is the person who eventually married Billy Graham. She was born and raised in China to missionary parents. Her parents were medical missionaries. And interestingly, from the age of 12, she knew that she wanted to be a missionary, an unmarried missionary in Tibet. That was a passion and a conviction that she had for such a long time. So fast forward to her going to Wheaton College in Chicago when she was 17. She got there and boom, she met Billy Graham. And she described him to her parents as someone who was very inspiring and had a passion for God and all of that. And there was this mutual attraction between the two of them, but she always wrestled with the fact that she wanted to be what? A missionary, and an unmarried one at that. But the feeling that they had for each other was mutual, and Billy also at the time knew that he was called to be an evangelist. So you have this person, Billy Graham, with a strong missionary who she recognized, right? But she also had the strong desire to be a missionary, and they loved each other. And it was like, okay, what next? And Billy was like, you need to decide, me or missionary work? And I'm sitting there thinking, that's harsh. But really, the Bible does say, can two work together?
Unless they agree.
Except they be agreed. So, she wrestled with this for months. And there was this note in her journal, which I just thought was absolutely amazing. She said, if I marry Bill, I must marry him with my eyes wide open. He will be increasingly burdened for lost souls and increasingly active in the Lord's work. After the joy and satisfaction of knowing that I am his by right and his forever, I will slip into the background. In short, be a lost life, lost in bills. I read that and I was like, wow. And it got me thinking to how when people are getting to know each other before they make decisions about being married, you know, about doing it with your eyes wide open. And Ruth recognized this. She knew that she loved Bill. She wanted to spend her life being with him, but she knew that he was passionate about this ministry that he had. And if she was going to do it, she understood the consequences. But of course, she was still struggling with this. And then she got back from a holiday and Billy asked her, he said, do you or do you not think that the Lord has brought her together? Has brought us together? And she couldn't argue with that. And she says, I do. And he said, in that case, I'll do the leading, you do the following, which I thought was really sweet. And then they got married. And she never looked back. She never expressed any regret for her decision to not be a missionary, even though she often talked about the challenges of being married to a world-famous evangelist. And this starts to be where I wanted to talk about her, because there was something she said, and in this world of celebrity lifestyle where everyone is an influencer or a celebrity and we just think, oh, I want to be famous, oh, I want the likes, oh, I want this and that. She said in her journal, she said, it's an odd kind of cross to bear, yet those who have not been through it will consider it some kind of glory. And I just thought, oh, wow. Because for her, what it was people were commenting on her makeup. And this was not even in the time of social media, so you can imagine, right? You'd have the press at the door of her house. They're taking pictures. They're looking for like a blade of grass or something that has fallen to pick and take as mementos. And she had her children in the house. So imagine being under that kind of scrutiny. And this is somebody who just didn't like the spotlight at all. When Billy was preaching, she would usually go into the crowd and go and sit somewhere at the back just so that she could be involved. But she loved her husband and wanted to support him. So, you know, that just blew my mind. It blew my mind. And as she raised her kids, one interesting thing was that the children said she never complained. Interestingly, she was referred to as the revival widow because Billy Graham was always away. Apparently, I read a funny story about how during her honeymoon, she fell ill and she was in the hospital, and Billy left her in the hospital, bought her some sweets or something. Well, no, and he went on the road and sent her a telegram and some sweets. But basically on their honeymoon, she already started to experience what life was going to be like for the rest of her life. But it's interesting that the children said they never heard her complain.
But she wrote in her journal though, because she said,
yes.
It was either she poured it out through
Yes.
her writing or develop an ulcer.
Yes,
so she was like,
exactly.
write or ulcer? Okay, fine, I'm going
Exactly.
to write.
Exactly.
And so she poured it out in that way.
So it's interesting. She spent a lot of time in reflection. She spent a lot of time writing. She poured out her heart. She did a lot of poetry, and there was a lot of writing in her personal journals. And I think it's a privilege that we have access to her writings. They were not really supposed to be for public consumption, but the fact that we have access to that and we see that gives us a glimpse into what life was really like for her. She suffered from depression, like you said. Writing was an outlet for her. So that just got me thinking. Sometimes you see people, you see them, you see celebrity, you think they've got this wonderful lives, but you don't know what's happening behind
It comes at a
closed
huge
doors.
cost.
It comes at a cost. It comes at a cost. The thing we do see, though, is that even when she seemed to be depressed or any of those things, she turned to God. So it wasn't a despair that took her to a dark place. She turned to God. And one of the things that her kids said later was that her light was always on. At any time of the day, you could see her light was always on in her bedroom. What was she doing? She was reading her Bible. That's how she spent her time, rather than missing her husband. She spent her time doing that. But she also found a way to be relevant. You know, while Billy was preaching to millions, she found a ministry preaching to individuals one by one, and she befriended criminals and stuff like that. So she had this legacy. And I think for me, when I think about her, it's the fact that in ministering to one, she ministered to the world, because Billy Graham is known as the evangelist that preached to
To millions and millions of people.
No one is recorded to have reached more people with the gospel than Billy Graham has.
So it feels like she was a missionary.
She was.
But her mission was just him.
Yes.
Because in serving him
Exactly.
and raising the kids, she gave him the freedom to serve and serve well. The way that, I would love to end this episode is with the word. Matthew 16:24 tells us that Jesus said to his disciples, if any one of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross and follow me. And that is Ruth Graham. She wanted to serve Jesus. She gave up her cross.
She counted the cost. She
counted
did it
the
with
cost,
her eyes wide open.
and she followed him.
That's right.
She put down her dreams and her aspirations for worldwide mission in the footsteps of her father and said, okay, this is my cross. This is the man that God has called me to. This is my mission, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that well. And I just hope that she encourages me, she inspires me, she reminds me that maybe sometimes your assignment might be just the one.
Yes.
It might be the child that you're called to raise. It might be the husband that you're called to support.
Yes.
It might be, just one thing. But in doing that one thing and doing that one thing well, you empower somebody
that makes a significant impact. Yes.
What's the last thing that you want to say about either of these two women?
Well, about Ruth, again, she reminds me of the Proverbs 31 woman. She was known to be a trusted counselor, so she's one that her children called her blessed, and her husband had trust in her, and he was who he was because of her. So, she was just phenomenal. So Proverbs 31 woman is possible.
It is possible, because we've seen an example with Ruth Graham. What I would like to leave with you is the importance of inner healing, the importance of not looking at your circumstances, but bringing God in the center of your life. Maybe there's something that you're going through right now, and it might be some kind of sickness, it might be financial, it might be, a divorce, whatever it is that you are going through right now. Can I just encourage you to bring Jesus to the center of it, that you take your eyes off the problems and you bring your eyes back to the Savior, and that he becomes the center of your world. The Bible says when we seek God, seek the kingdom of God and his righteousness, everything else will be added, and maybe everything else will be added to you as well. I look forward to the rest of season 4.